Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your last session. We are almost at the end of our conference. In a moment, we will have our final question and answer panel for the day. Sadly, this is where I part from you. However, as a first-generation attorney, I want you to know you are leaders, you are scholars, and you own your future. Remember today, you started your process to becoming an attorney. Don't let anything stop your success. Stay the course and keep believing. At this juncture, please give your attention to the moderator of our final panel, Attorney Nicole Haynes, and at the end of our final panel, Pipeline Subcommittee member Suzi Canali will give closing remarks. Thank you, and I bid you all the best.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Nicole Haynes. I am an attorney in Charlotte, North Carolina. I practice at the law firm Gardner Skelton, and my primary area of practice is labor and employment law. I'll now have each of the panelists introduce themselves in turn. We can start with Judge Burke-Hayer.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor and privilege to be with you all on today. I am Shante Burke-Hayer, District Court Judge here in Mecklenburg County, where I serve in criminal court.
And then Ms. Hardin. Okay, I could have had the wrong name written down. What about Julian Wright?
Julian Wright is here, thanks. My name is Julian Wright. I'm a lawyer here in Charlotte. I practice commercial and employment litigation with the firm of Robinson, Bradshaw, and Henson.
And then Racheal Baker.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Racheal Baker. I'm so honored to be a panelist for you here today on your last Q&A session. I'm an attorney in Charlotte, North Carolina. An assistant city attorney with the city of Charlotte. I practice basically transit law and real estate. I advise the Charlotte area transit system.
All right. And then Lashieka Hardin, again, she had a problem with the mute button.
Yeah, sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lashieka Hardin, and I am an assistant district attorney in Mecklenburg County, currently doing juvenile prosecution. I'm also a pipeline subcommittee member, so I'm super excited to be here today.
Great. It sounds like we're going to have an interesting panel. We have some final Q&A questions to wrap up. If I could just ask all of the panelists to put their name and email address in the chat so folks can reference that if they'd like to take down contact information. I'll add mine to the chat now. All right. The first topic that we have is discussing life after graduation. So I'm actually going to start with Julian Wright. Julian, could you talk about whether or not you already had a job, or how soon after graduating law school did you get your first job?
Sure. I was very fortunate coming through law school. Although this was longer ago than most people on the call, I expect. I graduated law school in 1992. But I had the opportunity to be a summer associate at a number of law firms during my time in law school. I also had a somewhat different career path in that I went to divinity school at the same time I went to law school. So I'm trained to be a preacher, even though I'm definitely not one. And so I had a lot of summers to get to explore different law firms in different cities. And so by the time I graduated law school, I did have an offer from Robinson Bradshaw to join them because I interviewed with them and been able to be recruited into their summer program during a couple of my different summers in graduate school. And then I also did a path, even though I had the offers from Robinson Bradshaw, I interviewed with and clerked for a federal judge. I sent around a lot of resumes and got an opportunity to clerk for a federal judge on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. So I did that for a year, and then my wife and I moved to Charlotte to start at Robinson Bradshaw. But for me, the law school recruitment or the law school job placement program worked really, really well. And I did have a very, very good opportunity coming out of law school.
Thank you. And then Judge Burke-Hayer, what about you? How soon after graduation did you get your first job, and what did your career trajectory look like? I imagine yours might be a little bit different than some of our other panelists.
Thank you for the question. So like Mr. Wright, I actually was fortunate to have a job right out of law school. So I had a few internships while I was in law school. And then once I graduated law school, one of my internships turned into a paid job. And so I was with a family law office for quite some time before branching out on my own and opening up my own firm. But at the same time, while I was with that firm, I was also assisting another law firm out in Cabarrus County with some part-time work and helping to get just manage cases and making sure that client contact was made. So I had two jobs out of law school, shall I say. And so yeah, very fortunate. And then, like I said, I worked with those firms for a few years, and then eventually I branched out and I opened up my own firm. And then after practicing in family law, primarily, I ended up being appointed to the bench. So very lucky, very blessed.
Fantastic. It sounds like the summer internship opportunities have been really important for the two of you. Racheal Baker, did you have a similar experience finding your first job?
Similar and dissimilar. I did not have a job out of law school. I had to search for months actually to find a job, even after I passed the bar. And so I don't want anyone who finds themselves in that situation to be discouraged. That does not in any way hinder your legal career, in my experience. However, in ways that it was similar, my first job out of law school ended up being with a company I did an internship with. So please pay attention to those internships. I think they are a great networking opportunity and an opportunity to endear yourself to an employer, potential future employer, with your work ethic.
And Ms. Baker, while you were searching for jobs, what sort of resources were available to you other than the network you had developed? Did you utilize any resources during that job search?
Yes, so there are a lot of, okay, so matter of fact, let me just list the resources, because I think that this may be helpful for folks who are finding themselves in a situation where they're looking for a legal position. Out of law school, I know a lot of law schools, including UNC where I went, have career development programs, and their whole job is to help you in your career and help you find positions. I will also look into your alumni network from your UNC or whatever law school you attend. Some more creative, let's call it creative resources I've come across is, I don't find that a lot of attorneys post their available positions on Indeed or Monster or these large job search platforms. And I'm not sure exactly why that is, but to the extent that you are not finding a lot of jobs on those platforms, I will also look into LinkedIn and also research the actual law firm that you would like to work for and go to their websites individually. I would place a little bookmark on each one. And by the time you have that system set up, it maybe takes 5 minutes per week to search those. And I think that that was a helpful tip that I didn't know at first when I was searching.
Thank you. And then Ms. Hardin, what was your experience like finding your first job out of law school?
Yeah, so I had a similar experience to Racheal. I did not have a job lined up right after law school. I was actually one of the last people, one of my friends from law school to get a job, but it wasn't too far afterwards. I had graduated, I believe, in May, and then I got a job in June. so it was like a 1 month, but it felt like forever. So I actually, I did I've never even interned at a private place. So I've always done public interest work. So they weren't, I think, giving out jobs as easily. And I used to check this place for public interest jobs. It was psjd.org. So I would always like just check there to see, what public interest job had posted any positions. And one day, this job, Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy, had posted a community redevelopment position. And so I applied for it. I didn't really know anybody there. And I ended up getting that job. And it was actually the first job and the only job I applied for in Charlotte, because I didn't expect to go or to come back to Charlotte at all. But although I didn't intern there, I did the work that they were asking for, that they wanted someone to do. I had done internships like that in law school. So while not a particular internship prepared me for it, the fact that I had done internships in law school and had some experience doing the work in my last job, that helped me get my foot in the door. So it all ended up working out.
Okay. A little bit backtracking from first jobs, I want to talk about the bar exam a little bit. I'll start with Judge Burke-Hayer. Could you tell us how difficult you thought the bar exam was and what studying for the exam was like for you?
Oh boy. So I am starting to come into telling this story, but the bar exam was challenging for me. Didn't expect it to be. I am someone who was once told that I was not even going to make it to law school. And this is me, someone who has always had a great GPA, always was involved, but to hear someone tell you you're not going to make it to law school, let alone pass the bar if you do get into law school. And so when I took I set for my bar exam for time and I did not pass it, those words started to play in my mind and I started to have self-doubt. But there's a larger side of me that will not allow me to quit. And so for me, yes, the bar exam was challenging. I did sit for my bar exam 5 times before I passed it. And after, not passing it for just a few points away. So I say that to say, yes, it was challenging, but nothing that I knew I could not accomplish. I just had to stay focused. And I remember having to work and study at the same time after giving birth to my first child. And it was a hustle, pretty much. It was a round the clock job, but I made it happen. And I tell everyone this, that if you truly want something and if it's really for you, it's going to be for you. It may not happen in your time or how you expected it or when you expected it, but it's going to happen. So if you keep at it, you just study hard. You have to make time for the studies though. You have to make time to study. It's not going to naturally come to you. You have to make time and study. And just go in there with as little anxiety as possible. That's harder, that's easier said than done rather. But if you just don't give up, no matter how many times you sit forward, whether you only sit once or you have to sit 10 times, take it, because if it's what you want to do, it will come to pass. So.
Thank you. It really goes to show what hard work and perseverance can reward you with. Ms. Hardin, can you talk a little bit about the bar exam and how the location that you take the bar exam affects where you can practice law?
Yeah, so I took the bar exam in 2019. So my class was actually the first class for the uniform bar exam. So for me, I don't know if I would have I scored high enough on the bar to be able to practice in any state in the country, but I didn't, but you would still have to apply for it in those states. So I didn't do it. And I believe it expires like 3 to 5 years. And so it's gone on about 4 years. So, but if there are certain states that if you take like North Carolina, I know is a part of it. I believe New York, South Carolina, there are certain states that if you take the bar exam in those states and you score a certain number, you'll be able to practice in that state, and you may be able to practice in another state depending on what your number is. And then there are other states where they don't have that uniform bar exam, such as Georgia, and I know California. And if you take the bar exam in those states, then it will have to be a state-specific law. So the uniform bar exam, you're gonna have more general rules. It's not gonna be North Carolina. It may be, that may be how they ask the questions, but in Georgia and South Carolina, it's gonna be specific. In Georgia, they do X, Y, Z, and you have to be familiar with those state-specific laws. And depending on your law school, I think that's important because some law schools focus on the state-specific if they know that a lot of their law students will be practicing in that particular state. I did go to Carolina, and so we knew at Carolina that a lot of people may not practice in Carolina, so we didn't specifically learn always North Carolina law, so it did make the uniform bar exam a lot easier for us to be able to take. And so that's something to consider when you're thinking about where you want to take the bar exam and where you want to go to law school, honestly.
Thank you. And then Ms. Baker, can you speak to, did you take the UBE or did you take the MBE?
No, I took the MBE. I graduated in 2017. And so I was one of the final classes to take the North Carolina specific MBE.
And then can you talk a little bit about what reciprocity and getting licensed in different states looks like under the MBE?
Sure. So under the MBE, there are certain states that have what's called reciprocity. And that really means that you don't have to take another bar exam to practice in that state. You just have to swear in. Now, there is a very large and complicated application process to do that. However, it's available for those states. And though they are the states that you have reciprocity with are limited, and you have to have a certain amount of years of experience to take advantage of that reciprocity.
Thank you. We're going to switch topics a little bit and talk about experiences juggling work-life balance, family, career. And I'd actually like Mr. Wright to field this one first. He's a seasoned attorney, and I think he has a lot of valuable experience with how he's managed to advance his career and also have, a life outside of work. Could you speak to that, Julian?
Sure, delighted to try. You would get different answers to that question depending on who you spoke with. My wife would say I don't balance it very well at all. My children say I'd probably do okay. And a lot of my law partners would contend I don't spend enough time practicing law and too much time doing the other stuff, but it all seems to work out generally in a balance. My best advice to folks is that it is difficult and demanding, but as a young lawyer, it is helpful to put a premium on the work opportunities you get and doing them well, even if that can take up a lot of time. At the same time, I think it's very effective to set boundaries to the extent that you can and preserve those boundaries. If it's important to your significant other and your kids or yourself to be home every night for dinner, then you need to get in the habit of knocking off work at 5:45 and being home in time for dinner, even if it means you pick up the files and the briefs and stuff and work on them later in the evening. Weekend time is a lot your own time, and you get opportunity to decide what you're going to do with that. Me, I love to be out hiking in the woods and doing some stuff that's about as unrelated to the law as you possibly can get. And I try to carve out time to do that. It also means that when you're doing work, it's very, very important. I'll borrow this from a friend of mine who's a management consultant. You have to be very, very intentional. Don't coast with what you're doing. Don't, reading through the stack of documents and figuring out what questions you're going to ask at the deposition is hard enough if you're concentrating and paying attention. Don't just flip through the documents while you're thinking about something else or wondering and wishing you could be somewhere else, or gee, I'm missing this because I'm having to be here doing this. Be intentional. be very, very deliberate in what you're doing when you do it. And hopefully over time you develop some skills, you develop some experience, and you're able to be more efficient. And when you're efficient, then you get to do hopefully lots of work and have some really excellent work opportunities and experiences. But at the same time, it's not your life. It's an old adage. It's certainly a true one. I'll speak as I think the only male on this panel, although I guess it could apply both ways. But the old expression is that law is a jealous mistress. It's very demanding, and it will pull you in and take up as much of your time as you're willing to give it. And to be good at it, it does take time. There's no substitute for that. But to maintain your sanity, to maintain your health, to maintain your marriage and your relationships with other people, it's incredibly important in my experience not to be a lawyer 24/7. I guess in some ways you are a lawyer 24/7. It's important not to practice law 24/7 and figure out ways and opportunities to take a break from doing that.
Okay, Judge Burke-Hayer, I'd like to hear a little bit about community involvement and the networking that you've done throughout your career.
Sure. So I have always been in the community, stayed in the community, probably since I was a young girl, whether I was volunteering through my 4-H program back home, volunteering through and with my sorority of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, intentionally volunteering with my church, but even as an attorney, volunteering within the bar and as a judge, it's important to continue to volunteer and continue to serve beyond the bench. One of the things that I've often said was, judges, we impact people that come into the courtroom, but the true impact really can take place outside of the courtroom if we meet them out there where they are and influence them then. We can probably catch them then, and maybe we won't see them in front of us. But it's important to stay engaged with the community. It's important to make sure that you give back. One quotes that I liked, I think it was Booker T. Washington. He said, if you want to lift yourself or uplift yourself, uplift someone else. And so that's what service and giving back to the community truly means to me. And it's important for everyone within this legal community to do that, to reach back and grab someone and bring them up with you. And you would be amazed how much you would feel, how amazing you would feel doing that.
And a follow-up to that, can you talk about the importance of pro bono work as well, from your vantage point as a practicing attorney and as a judge?
Yes, I did a little pro bono work as well as a practicing attorney. It's great exposure. It's exposure, and I sometimes did it in an area of law that I did not practice all the time, but maybe I had an interest in. So that's one way to expose yourself to a different area and to learn, but also, again, to make connections with other people, other attorneys, other legal professionals, and then other people within the community. Pro bono work is very rewarding. Yes, you may be doing it for free or very little value, but again, just think about the impact that you're making and the greater good that you're doing it for. Pro bono work is essential. Everyone cannot afford an attorney that comes to court, and to have attorneys that are willing to do the work because of their compassion for the law and their empathy for other people is essential.
Thank you. We have about 5 minutes left. So I have a couple of shorter, well, they might be shorter. Ms. Baker, could you talk a little bit about the attorney's continuing education requirements and just what that looks like year to year?
Sure. So for the past few years, they've changed it up just slightly a little. So continuing legal education, or CLEs as we call them, are requirements for you to keep your license. There are educational courses that you take, and you have to take a number of them or a number of hours to meet the requirement. They are in a few different subject matters, and some of the subject matters are required, such as there's a technology credit that's required. there's also a mental health type credit that's required. So you have to do these annually and file a report verifying that you have completed your requisite number of CLEs.
Thank you. And then also, could you describe your experience as potentially one of the few people of color in the legal department with the city of Charlotte, or what your experience has been throughout your career as a woman of color?
Sure. So I think as a woman of color, the legal profession at large is probably, you're probably a unicorn based on national statistics. I think the national statistics are like 1%. It's something ridiculous. At the city of Charlotte, it's not representative. There are a good amount of people of color working as attorneys for the city of Charlotte, but then again, we have like maybe 50 to 60 attorneys. For a firm or somewhere that is less diverse, I would say that your community is going to be where you're going to find a lot of your support. So please make sure you do not isolate yourself and engage with other attorneys, even outside of the place where you work specifically. You know, we are all legal professionals, and in general, I find that the legal community of color is incredibly supportive.
Thank you. And then Ms. Hardin, I'm going to ask our final question to you. It's a two-part question. What do you find most rewarding about your job? And then also, what do you like least about your job?
What do I find most rewarding about my job? I've always done public interest, public service work. So I find it very rewarding to be in a position to be able to help people. I'm usually doing something that directly impacts people's lives. For instance, now I do juvenile prosecution. So, and we get to be involved with rehabilitation of the juvenile. So figuring out what the juveniles need to be successful, to not recidivate. And I find that very rewarding. I love thinking of ideas on what the kids need, whether that's honestly sometimes having to send them back to detention, or whether that's, you know, sending them to outside of their home, seeing that maybe that home life isn't, you know, good for them, or whether that's getting them in some type of program, mentoring. I enjoy thinking of ideas on how to help people. So I find that very, very rewarding for me. What I like the least is honestly seeing just what I see in the courtroom. Honestly, I get to hear life stories. I get to hear kind of what's going on the ground, how people ended up where they are. And sometimes it's kind of heartbreaking, because I know a lot of the times the people who, you know, end up in the most trouble oftentimes also come from the worst backgrounds. And so sometimes it makes me think, or makes me feel like life isn't fair. So it hurts me to see, you know, how certain people end up in the criminal justice system. So I would say that would be the worst part. But then again, just being able to come up with an idea to potentially help them is the best part.
Okay. I see a question about getting contact info for the panelists. I believe everyone posted their contact information earlier in the chat. And then in some of the other sessions, I've heard that the contact information may also be circulated later. Mr. MC, can you speak to that? Perhaps.
I think Mr. MC jumped off at the beginning of our session. Looks to me like maybe everybody but Ms. Hardin has been able to put in email information from our panel. I don't know if she's had a chance to do that yet.
I don't know if you all can hear me. Contact information will be provided after the conference for everyone who has granted permission that served as panelists and moderators today. So be on the lookout from the follow-up email after the conference, and it will have that information in there.
Okay, wonderful.
We will also post it on your event dashboard under the resources.
Okay, great. And then did we have any other questions come in on the chat or questions that needed to be addressed from earlier in the conference. I just saw in my notes that we were supposed to follow up to see if there were any questions collected that hadn't been addressed yet.
We didn't have any additional questions in the chat, and I think we covered most everything that was asked otherwise. So I think we are good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for attending today and giving me the privilege of moderating. I'm going to turn it back over to the MCs for the final closing statements.
The final closing statements will be done by subcommittee member attorney Suzi Canali.
Thank you, Aman. My name is Suzi Canali. I'm an attorney with a local nonprofit in Charlotte where I represent survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. We wanted to thank you all so much today for taking time out of your Saturday to be with us. We hope you enjoyed it. The survey for your feedback opened at 2 p.m. today, and it will remain open for you to provide feedback and suggestions about today's conference. The survey is located on the event dashboard. And although we didn't announce, the leaders in our leaderboard will be receiving Amazon gift cards in your email on Monday. Please be on the lookout for more events from the Pipeline Programming Subcommittee and enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Thank you.